guys for coming this morning. We have David Cantor from Blue Spring Wealth Partners and Kevin Corbett from Mariner Wealth Advisors. Excited to be with you guys.
Likewise. Thank you.
We were able to catch up a couple hours over the last couple of days, and actually, I think we may even become friends. So,
God forbid.
I know, right? So, David, we have to start with you. A lot of excitement this summer in July, a big announcement for you, a big move. I know a lot of people just want to hear from you, and I know that it's a good move for you. I know Fidelity misses you already, but just talk a little bit about Blue Spring, what your role is going to be there, and what you're excited about there.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Last day of the conference. Hope we all had fun last night. I know I did. Watching all the bands, Fits and the Tantrums were awesome, and I want to thank the Future Proof team. I did a transition in my life over the summer, and after several years at Fidelity, which is a phenomenal firm, I see some of my former colleagues out there in the audience. I wanted to try something different to test myself in a new challenge, and I have to say that with change comes growth. So I like to say in this profession, if you're not growing, you're not surviving really. So I wanted my own personal growth and to, take all the things I've done over the course of my almost 30-year career in the RIA profession, and we can talk more about that, and go to a firm that I really believe has something to offer for the future. And it's all in my mind about growing the pie, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that because the RIA profession, the wealth management profession is in constant renewal. So sorry for the long answer, Chris, but...
No, we wanted it. We wanted to hear. And Kevin, you guys actually worked together at Fidelity years ago.
We did.
So been in a similar space, and so it's nice to have you guys on stage together. So there was a M&A panel at the beginning of the conference, and it was more of a battle between Dave DeVoe and Brian Hamburger. But I feel like today is more of a collaborative discussion, and we're not going to fight here. We're just going to talk about M&A and what makes sense. Is there any advisors in the audience, any advisors that are open to being acquired or looking to be acquired? There's an advisor. Thank you. Good. So hopefully we can give you some ideas of what acquirers are looking for. Like how do you get your practice ready or your team ready to be looked at and be part of this deal-making process that's so exciting? I feel like M&A and wealth management has become almost an industry of its own, right? Like in the last 10, 12 years, it just continues to grow. So obviously we want to talk about that. Kevin, do you want to kind of set the stage right now? Like what does M&A look like from the buyers and sellers perspective? What are you seeing in the market? How is it evolving over the last 10 years?
Sure, absolutely. And again, thanks everybody for making it this morning. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. My sense is, we're seeing a tremendous amount of, record year over year, right? Which still represents a very, very small fractional amount of firms that are being transacted in one way or the other within the industry at large, right? Again, if you think about where we are as an industry, there are very low barriers to entry, and new RIA firms are created year after year, every year. There continues to be, a new slate of firms coming to market time and time again. I would tell you that from a buyer standpoint, we see tremendous flow right now. We see tremendous opportunity. What we see are a variety of reasons well beyond what you typically read about in the trade rags about why all of this activity is happening. And so typically it's always pegged to succession planning. And succession planning is one reason, one driver perhaps of why people are looking at a strategic partnership, but it's not the only one. And those of us out there who are participating regularly and perhaps printing more and more of the deals are seeing really unique opportunities with some of these firms that are coming to market that are far more interested in a lot of other capabilities, ability to serve their clients in a deeper, more meaningful way, thinking about their next generation teams, and it's not just about an owner, operator, or a founder trying to fulfill and satisfy his retirement plan. I would also couple that with we're seeing a tremendous amount of sellers' representation come to the market. We all know David was here Sunday speaking, DeVoe and Company, and some of the other investment bankers out there who are representing the lion's share of the firms that are coming to market. But each and every week, I get a call from a new investment banker, a new seller's representation that wants to talk to us about what we're doing and what they're doing. So we continue to see new entrants into the marketplace.
Yeah, there's an added layer. Like I was saying, it's a whole other industry. There's consultants, there's the investment bankers, there's a whole group of people now involved in the process.
Yeah,
so it's starting to get more elaborate.
It is.
What about, David, do you see, how has that changed over the years?
Well, I guess I would let me add on to a couple things that Kevin stated that I think are really important for everybody to just keep in mind. One is we are in a state of self-renewal. So the number of, if we're focused in the RIA market, of RIAs keeps growing year over year. In fact, there was a 6.7% growth in just the number of registrants from 2021 to this year, and this is all from ADV data. So this year, to date, there have been, I think, Kevin, Fidelity's numbers, and there are plenty of other numbers, something like 120 transactions, representing 160 billion in assets traded. So that's a tiny fraction. If you think of the RIA number of registrants is almost 15,000 now. And so that number keeps, there may be, business combinations, but there are also, a constant slate of new registrants. So I think that's important, and we're talking about the ecosystem. The other thing I would add to what Kevin shared that I think is also really important, he didn't say this out loud, but I think there's a sense of folks not wanting to be left behind. So sure, we're in what I would call an M&A age wave, in that some of the founders, some of the women and men who have started firms, are thinking, what do I want next for my future? And how am I going to realize the value of something I built? And it's not enough for me to take a note that's paid for out of my own cash flow for my G2s or G3s in some cases. So we have this age wave, but there's this notion of not wanting to be left behind, because as Kevin was saying, there are firms like his firm, firms like my firm, that are building out platforms that create time machines for the principals and advisors of these firms, so they have more time to focus on clients, more time to grow the business, more time to do the things that they love in terms of developing that next generation. So that's why I think, we may not be in the morning of M&A in the RIA profession, but we're certainly, we're certainly not at lunchtime. We're kind of, we've just had breakfast, I'd say. And the other thing I'd say is I haven't talked about the broker-dealer model, which is also important. There were 2 major M&A transactions in the broker-dealer space, and those represented 60 billion in assets traded. So, these tend to be larger organizations. That's why there's not as much volume and velocity. So I'm sure we could keep going on, but I wanted to add on to what my good friend Kevin said.
No, and I wanted you to clarify a little bit more when folks not left behind. Like, do they want to be part of that larger culture and company? And can you expand on that a little bit more? Because you said that to me the other day, and I was wondering, did you mean from a financial perspective, like the opportunity there, or just to be part of those bigger communities and cultures?
Yeah, I mean, the way, and I don't know, just by sort of show of hands, how many of you work for wealth management firms? Okay, so let's say, all right, hands are going up. Yeah, people are waking up. So I'm going to say, based on my rough count, that was about 50%, maybe 60. And you can be, a lot of wealth management firms started as sort of artisan shops, boutiques that crafted their offering to their clients in a very specialized way. But what we've seen is these boutiques, coming together to create platforms. And you can be a boutique for the rest of your life, if that's your business model. But in a world where boutiques are coming together and forming platforms, it can be harder to compete. So it goes back to this growth paradigm.
Yeah, got it. So, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about, I don't know, can you call Mariner a serial acquirer, maybe? But can you tell us a little about what does your firm look for? What are characteristics that make teams stand apart? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I prefer the term branded acquirer over serial acquirer. I think serial indicates that you're going to continue to just try and do transaction after transaction just in an effort to get bigger, to participate in a bigger revenue stream, whatever that looks like. That's just not simply who we are as an organization.
And just to clarify, you're not acquiring cereal.
We are not. No, we're getting closer to lunch, so we're
Did I say
focused on other
cereal
things.
instead of cereal? It's the same thing, right?
I speak, the Queen's English, so I wasn't sure. Anyway, sorry to disrupt you.
David's thinking about breakfast because we took him away from his breakfast, so that's why that happened. All right, go ahead, Kevin.
No, what I would add is that, as we look at, and just by virtue of example, everybody read about all of the record volume last year in 2021. All of the volume that we saw, and I have co-lead our mergers and acquisitions group at Mariner, have direct oversight of the western half of the U.S. My colleague Brian, also a Fidelity veteran whom David knows very well, handles the East Coast. We saw about 230 to 240 deals last year. We did 16 deals. We quite frankly turn away more than we actually see. For us, it's about finding a unique opportunity within the marketplace of these sellers coming forward that are looking to solve more than, again, just their own succession strategy. You want to hear them talk about capabilities. So the leave behind, right? I view the leave behind and the ability to compete in this marketplace is something that these platforms offer a very attractive model for. It allows advisors and their teams to do more to be able to serve the needs of their clients as those clients' needs continue to be more complex. Right, so that's a perfect example. When they talk very strongly about their next generation teams, we're all very aware, keenly aware that the talent premium in this industry sits at an all-time high, right? And to the extent that these firms are not growing and not creating a compelling opportunity, both personally and professionally, for their next generation advisors, those folks are going to be looking for new homes, right? And so to the extent that as we evaluate any firm, it aligns with who we are as an organization, and it offers unique, attractive opportunities for next generation advisors that we know we can create a very compelling career path for, those are the ones we're more apt to get, seriously engaged with.
That's a good point. So the younger teams are more attractive sometimes. I read one of the articles that was written back this summer. Someone had commented that Blue Spring's model was not tiered towards the younger management teams, but more towards succession planning and those kind of acquisitions. Is that true? Or it wasn't your comment, it was someone else's comment. So
yeah, and I'll tell you what we're looking at, because it's not exclusive to that perspective, because there are some interesting questions here that we should get to, because they tie in a lot to this. But we're looking for 5 things, and I'm saying 5, but you could condense it to 3, you could make it 6. But the first is, and there's a question in there about culture. We want a cultural fit. For us, and I know the same is true for Kevin's firm, are you client-focused, to a maniacal focus almost, to the point where you're grooming G2. So G2 is very important to us, to take over the reins of the firm. So it's not enough to have a business with clients, but you have to have folks that are going to transcend with that and operate the business. We're not a branded acquirer. We let the firms maintain their own brand. There is some commonality, which we can talk about. But our solution is to take all what we call the defensive tasks away from them. Some of the back office things like payroll, HR, finance, procurement, real estate, and so forth. And the other thing that we do is we're also focused on, if you haven't heard already, maintaining that entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
We're looking for firms that are growing. And so there's a question here about the due diligence process. So we spend a lot of time understanding growth, because growth inures to the benefit of not just Blue Spring, but our partner firms. That's how we refer to them. And we have a program also to focus on the G1s, because transitioning your life's work, which is really the case, remember going back to that artisan construct, it takes a lot of emotional and thoughtful work with both the G2s and in some cases the G3s and the G1. So my partner, Stuart Silverman, who upon my joining has become chairman, we're sort of enacting our own sort of process there. Yeah. So there's an emotional, there's an operational, and there's a management structure that we apply to that. So
that kind of leads into the next question about how do acquirers avoid becoming Wirehouse 2.0, right? Like, what are you guys doing with your culture to ensure that that's not happening? And I think what you just said, like allowing them to keep their own brand, but just taking the back office from them, giving them their time back to work on their clients. I think that's one. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think that there's a difference, and I won't talk about other models. I'll just put it in this construct, that the wonderful thing about the RIA profession, and I'm somebody who's been in this profession, as I like to say, I started out in the nightclubs and bars, and now it's suddenly an overnight success. I was doing this back in the early 90s when no one really knew what an RIA was. And the only thing arguably hotter than the RIA market is crypto, but I think it's the RIA market's hotter now. So to answer that question, the wonderful thing about the profession is that it's right there in the Advisors Act. There's a fiduciary duty to put the client's interests first. And that is what this profession has been founded on. And the rush, not just of advisors, but of consumers, of investors, to fee-based, fee-only models is the proof in the pudding. There's a wonderful report, which I think anyone who's interested in this topic should read. It's called the Industry Snapshot by the Investment Advisor Association. They do a wonderful job of talking about not just the growth and the trends in the profession, but the migration of investors to this model.
Yeah. So I know we have all this stats and articles about the deals are greater this year than they were last year. They're greater this quarter than they were last quarter. Even with all that data, are you feeling any kind of hesitancy or slowdown with fears of recession and inflation? Are the deals taking a little longer? Is anyone kind of getting cold feet? Are you feeling any of that?
So I'll go first. I would say that we haven't seen deal flow slow down. It's just not happening. And we get our deal flow, generally 50 to 60% comes from the investment bankers, 40 to 50% at any given time is self-sourced, it's center of influence referrals, directly into us. So we kind of take them across our process from a variety of different inflows, and it's just not slowing. What I think is going to happen is, or I see happening, is those that fit into that category of the serial acquirers, the branded acquirers, the ones who are doing, most of the transactions out there, we're just simply becoming more picky. We're seeing so much deal flow right now that as we look across an opportunity, and look, we've all just lived through this 2.5, 3 year pandemic where all of the investment bankers, because they've had such deal flow, they're doing everything virtual as much as possible. They're even doing blind indications of interest before you even get a chance to engage with a leadership team or a management team. And that's just not conducive to a good process in my mind, right? And so the question here about how do you assess cultural fit? Well, that model is rife for disaster from a cultural standpoint until you can really engage with somebody and determine, are we a good fit as much as they're a good fit for us, right? That's really what's going to drive a successful deal. And so, as I see more and more deal flow coming, more sellers representation, and people trying to leverage technology efficiently, I think it's going to slow the process down a little bit because as we acquirers who have capital to deploy can be more selective and be more choosy and picky about whom we partner with and offer into the organization, that's just going to kind of put, I think, deals at a little bit slower pace, perhaps.
Yeah. So there's a question, it looks like it's probably from an advisor team, but explain the transaction process. How long does it take? David, I don't know if you want to answer that. How is it comped? I think that,
Yep. How is it? What was the last part? Oh,
I
comped.
think, yeah.
I'm not sure what I know what the word comped means, but
I think you might be
compared
referring to
compared to
financial.
other deals, or well, let me just describe the transaction process, and I'll also build upon what Kevin said a little bit. We too, walk away from more deals than we actually act upon, and I'd say that the marketplace, the pipeline is robust, and. We're looking for firms that are growing, as I said. So the due diligence process focuses on a number of areas that you'd expect. What's the history of the firm? Who's the team? Who's the leadership? So let me, if I could, I'll break it down really quickly into the categories, and then I'll unpack it just a little bit. But there are 5 areas that we look at. Who's your target client? What are your capabilities? So what are the tools, whether it's planning, investment management, tax planning that you deliver, that you're offering, if you will? Who's the team? What's your org structure? Who are the client advisors? What are the ratios of clients? How much revenue is attributed to one particular advisor? So sort of, what's the sort of key person risk there, or key client risk if you have attrition? What's your infrastructure, your technology stack, your compliance, your controls, your real estate? And then finally, the question that I think everybody struggles with, but I will tell you what I believe the answer is what's your unfair advantage? What is that aspect of your business that can't be easily, if replicated at all? Because if you go to many of the websites of wealth management firms, if you take away, the language, it's a little bit of a sea of sameness, right? So you have to be able to articulate that. So we spend a lot of time with culture. And what is culture? It really involves getting to know the leaders of the firm, the folks that are part of the team if they've been, read into the process. But it's a lot of referenceability checks. It's a confidential process, but we will have, partners within our network who can share what they've experienced. I know Kevin's firm does the same thing. And then it's really just a hard look at the numbers. And the numbers in this business are pretty easy. Are you growing? What part of that is organic, excluding the market? And we'll do sort of a year-over-year look. But I've been talking too much. I'll let Kevin sort of unpack it a little more.
No, I just share that, growth is unique out there. To find a firm that's actually growing organically outside of just the occasional client referrals, which is how all of you grow, that's something unique. That's going to command a little bit of a premium in the marketplace as we assess, any opportunity. And so I think there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation perhaps out there in general about, record valuations. But again, given what we're seeing, where we're successfully participating in deals, they're all in still a mid-range of multiples on EBITDA, right? That's how we value a business. That's how we look at it from a financial standpoint. But before we even get to that point, we have an entire process that we'll take them through to assess culture, to take them through our process and really kind of, dig in from the standpoint of, getting to know them and them also getting to know folks beyond just myself who help lead the deal process, right? Engaging with our teams in a significant way. And each step along the way, you're always assessing, is this going to be a good partner for us so we can avoid the very disaster that's mentioned here in this next question, right? Mm-hmm. And look, that's a continuing, evolving type of situation. So, just by way of perspective, in 2019, my team, the corporate development and strategy team, was 3 individuals. Today we have 17 individuals on our team doing everything from the due diligence and the financial modeling and the onboarding. I always tell people, look, firms out there, and it gets back to this question about, direction of the firm and cultural, conflicts and things like that. Anybody can write a check, right? And when there's a lot of money chasing a small number of opportunities, there's the potential that those checks get a little bit bigger each and every time, and that's hard to turn away, a couple million more dollars on certain deals. But if it's not the right fit for the seller long term, that's what's going to lead to the disaster,
So in your early days when there was 3 of you on your team and you were sourcing deals, I don't know what this horror story was, but maybe you have a lesson. Maybe you acquired a team that maybe they presented themselves a different way in the courtship phase. Anything you want to share? Kind of like dating, like you're really nice in the beginning and then what happens? I don't know. Let's hear. They've got me curious. I want to know what this horror story is, so maybe you have one for us.
I don't have a good horror story that I can point back to. I think, generally we try to spend enough time, Chris, on the front end, assessing that. And just because of our natural inclination to take them through a very rigid process that we have to expose them to a whole host of people across the organization from a leadership standpoint that will ultimately serve them, their business, their advisors. We hope to eliminate that, right? And so, we've had sellers that, have had basically just that mental hurdle that they couldn't get over of selling their business ultimately. Yeah. That's caused the deal to, kind of go south at the very late stages. But, we're fortunate enough with what we've done and the number of transactions we've successfully completed that we haven't had many disasters, right?
Well, that's good. Good.
Yeah.
I remember 5 years ago we helped launch Dakota Wealth. That's Peter Raimondi, and he hired someone just to evaluate culture. That was his whole role, and that was the first I thought about that. It was like 5 years ago, but he solely wanted him to. He wasn't evaluating the money. The whole deal was his job was to ensure that whoever they acquired was a culture fit, and I thought that was interesting. I think that's the first time I really thought about that. What about you, David? Not a horror story, but a challenge, something you learned early on that you can teach someone. I mean, there are people here, I can see someone in the audience now that maybe is thinking about making acquisitions. They want to be part of that game as well. Any advice for what they should look for and not miss?
I mean, and I won't speak from experience in my current role leading Blue Spring, but I will speak to just what I've seen in the industry and the profession because I've been in it for so long. I would say that the early days there weren't a lot of models, whether you call them serial acquirers or branded acquirers or
aggregators, roll-ups.
Yeah. But as the number of these firms have increased, reflective of all the capital that's flowing, the models have changed, and I think it's become a lot more refined, frankly. So I think I haven't heard of any horror stories
Good.
recently. I think it's incumbent upon firms that are either doing acquisition or thinking about a combination, on the other side. Have a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And have a lawyer that's, really well schooled in the space. Because, all of these arrangements are a series of agreements. And, culture is embedded within the course of dealing and the agreements that people make with one another, whether it's a familial culture, a business culture, which has its own family.
Yeah.
And so understand what you're agreeing to. And then, I find that most agreements that, become troubled, it's just, it tends to come from a state of emotion.
Yeah.
So, make sure that you understand the emotion involved. And I think that's what we try to do. I know Kevin's firm tries to do is, it's an emotional process thinking about combining your business. And so I left this out, forgive me, but the big reason I joined Blue Spring was the culture. The culture of the team. We have a great team. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to work with people who bring the best out of me, and I can bring the best out of them. So that's my advice is look for that. Understand the emotional implications, understand the contractual and legal implications.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. I'll let you.
I was just going to say, the attorneys is one thing, and the attorneys are typically, look, if you were to simplify it and say an acquisition is a 10-step process, the attorney's going to get involved in 6 to 8, perhaps, right? I think there's tremendous value in consulting with sellers' representation. They have a good perspective on who all the active players are in the marketplace. And so questions like this, what are the ranges of multiples? Why does a deal go south? What are this is where there's tremendous subject matter expertise from these bankers that can take somebody through a process. Yes, there'll always be the emotional hurdle that a seller, owner, operator has to kind of get over. But to the extent that they try and run that process on their own, it can be successfully done. We've engaged with many, many of those firms. But it just elongates the process, and it creates a scenario where they're perhaps coming to the table with a lot of misconceptions that could have been answered much more earlier on in the process, which creates a much more smooth, process going down the road.
I think that's right, and it blends to a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
I think the question is, how do you prepare? Whether if you're doing, acquisitions, or how do you prepare if you want to combine your business? And I think that some of the questions here about growth, about multiples and data, it's understanding, who your clients are from a number of perspectives. Demographics, so how many clients are below 30? How many clients are 30 to 50? How long have they been with you from a tenure perspective? How have those relationships grown? Are those relationships in accumulation mode, or are they in deaccumulation mode, or some other component? So understanding your data, I think, is very important if you're preparing yourself for some type of transaction, because those are some of the things that firms that are in the acquisition mode look for.
Yeah, Kevin, you want to do you have any data on post-purchase client attrition when a sale is a succession story? In other words, do clients leave when their advisor sells? We never talk about how does it affect the client? That's a great question. Kevin, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to say they just don't. They trust their advisor. They follow their advisors. Client retention numbers across the board are very, very high, right? When you as an advisor that is selling your business can talk to your clients in a meaningful way about how typically most owner-operators out there got into the business to be able to elbow with clients, helping them plan, serve their families, and they find themselves years later as the accidental CEO. They're responsible for everything in that organization. It's gotten them farther and farther away from the client interaction and what they're passionate about doing. And so when they are invigorated in the business and they have all this capacity returned to them, they can talk to their clients about new capabilities, new solutions that they'll be able to deliver to them and their families, and continue to meet the needs and be more competitive, frankly, in this evolving marketplace. Clients just don't leave. We have never experienced massive attrition in any way. I mean, our client retention numbers we measure as a whole across the organization. We've got a goal at 98%. We're above that each and every quarter. We measure it monthly. We measure it weekly, and we measure that as a part of the deal process. And it's very much in line with very, very high retention numbers.
Yeah, I mean, you think about your relationship, like whoever does your hair, if he moves places, are you going to say, I'm going to stick with this barbershop? No, you're going to go with
That's
the
right.
person who takes care of you and that you trust and you know. So, and even on such a deeper level when you're talking about managing your finances. So I can imagine, unless you have an account, you just don't engage with your advisor, then I think there's the small risk of losing those small accounts or ones that just weren't nurtured by the advisor. I think that would make sense. What is a range of multiples you're seeing? I think we talked about valuations and how are you seeing that?
You want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the question is what multiples are you seeing is, that's like the headline grabber. But there's this old expression, which I know folks are familiar with, which is, you name the price if I set the terms. And so deal structures are generally, I don't know Mariner's structure, but there's generally a agreed upon price, which is pegged to a multiple. But then there are growth measures that are contained therein. And so many deals are structured with, an initial payment at the time of closing, and then, a payment over the course of an earnout. And so that can affect the multiple. Look, what we're seeing, the same thing that Kevin said, we decide not to engage with many of the opportunities that are sent our way. The number of transactions that are being presented by investment bankers is just robust. That's why he has a team of 17. That's why we have a team of not quite 17, but on a combined basis, about, I think it's a dozen, because it's evaluating all these opportunities. And so you have to understand what your screens are, because a lot of it is understanding if there's growth. If there's growth, firms like Kevin's, firms like mine, we're going to take a harder look and lean in. And that's why there's so much initiative around how can you grow your firm in ways that firms have not thought about traditionally. The way these businesses have historically grown are three ways: client referrals, centers of influence referrals, and then either hiring or acquiring advisors. But new ways are being presented in terms of developing more business because there's a bull market for advice. I don't know what you'd add to that.
I would say again, I think the multiple range is a big misconception right there in the marketplace. And make no mistake about it, we all have read about all the volume over the last 2 years or so, and there was a particular buyer out there that was paying up for deals, right? And they've stepped to the sidelines now, and that's kind of tempered the market back to a more normal place. But I can tell you that we have a very disciplined process, much like many of the other firms that we will continue to run into time and time again. And when the valuation of a business far exceeds what we feel is appropriate for that business, we're just not going to participate any longer. We're not going to chase deals, right? And so there still continues to be new capital sources coming into this business that are chasing the opportunity. You talked about fear of missing out, right? I think there's also this fear of missing out that if firms aren't growing organically, their only pathway to growth is inorganic. Go acquire somebody in your backyard or your local community or somebody that you've perhaps competed with, right, over time. And again, I come back to this theme of, and it addresses one of these next questions about best practices at post-acquisition. How does this all kind of come together? I mean, anybody can write a check. Not everybody can successfully integrate a business and allow those advisors to continue to serve, retain those clients, and grow their client base. And that's where you're going to see the one and dones. They're going to come to market, they're going to pay up for these deals, and these sellers are probably not going to be partnering with the right firm for the long term.
Yeah. I mean, there's another thing that is not talked about enough, in my opinion, is Kevin mentioned integration. But the ongoing relationship, the ongoing operation with these team members that are part of your organization. So we lean in and engage on business planning, and how we're going to engage with one another on a yearly planning basis. And so that's actually the magic. The magic is what happens next.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about to use your words, Chris, the courtship phase.
Yeah.
But then what happens next is what matters. That's, the courtship stage is where the rubber meets the sky.
Yeah.
what happens after the transaction closes is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time, and the team is that's why I joined, and the ability to partner with the firms in our network to do all that. There's one other thing that I'd add, and if I could, that I think Kevin, you brought up about sellers representation. I think his firm and our firm, the thing that we are committed to is we're going to consult with all of those firms that we're talking to, whether it fits our model or not. Because our model is we want to be the best consultants and help people make a good choice and do what's in their best interest. So one of the things what reasons I joined is the culture of the firm. I want to grow the category. I want to support the category of independent advice. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I enunciated that.
No, that's a good point. And, we see a lot of breakaways. They're still breaking from the wirehouses. It's a regular thing, right? When I read my news every day, I'm like, who broke and who acquired who this week? It's not slowing down, as you said. And I think even with the fears of recession and the capital's still there, this is not stopping anytime soon. I think we've all agreed on that. As we're starting to close, each of you want to just talk about the outlook for Q4 2023, what you're excited about, any challenges you might see. Obviously, we think the deal flow is not going anywhere. We're all, excited, positive, it's going to continue, but any challenges, anything looking into Q4 2023 that you want to share?
Yeah, my sense is, and I'll go first, sorry. If we continue to see market dislocation and quarterly billing for advisors continues to be down, that might temper a few people from bringing their deals to marketplace. So that may eventually slow a little bit. Do I think it represents a meaningful slowdown in a big way? No. That will take 10% of the market and defer it 6, 12 months or whatever, right? And I say that because, again, by and large, many of the firms that we find attractive and are getting serious and engaging with, they're not on a glide path to retirement. They're not looking to satisfy this in a 2-3 year period and then exit the business, right? So these are next generation teams. These are firms that have the wherewithal and the time to sit back and wait until the time is right for them. So I think that starts to slow a little bit. I think to the extent that interest rates continue to rise, deal structure perhaps may start to change, modify. And so again, in a world where a seller goes about it on their own, they're going to have a very complex set of different offer structures to review and go through and try and make sense of. Whereas again, the value of representation, the value of a consulting, whatever that looks like can help you make more sense of the variety of structures that are candidly kind of being utilized out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't think there'll be a slowdown. I should actually qualify that. I don't think there'll be a material slowdown. Yeah. The water table in terms of the transaction volume and the size of the transactions has just increased. So, maybe there's a dip, but it's morning in America when it comes to the wealth management marketplace.
Yeah. Look, and I think we're continuing to improve, or getting more efficient. The processes are improving. The way you're selecting, the way the deals are coming to life. I think it's better for the advisors. It's better for the clients. Obviously, it's going to continue to evolve and get even better. And I think it's exciting to be part of the industry. It's like its own industry now. Wealth management, M&A, like it just continues to grow. And I think there's opportunities for all of us here, our clients, and continue to keep making those relationships better. You said relationship. I think that's a good point. Like all of this is about a relationship. Like who has the most capital, who has the best characteristics, but really like forming a relationship with your team and then bringing them on board. I think that's when you're going to have success. That's when you're going to win. We don't really go into that, but the relationship is the most important thing.
Of course, it's a relationship business. These are professional services businesses, so the goodwill is tied up in the relationship.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I think we all try to do is.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing that I would, as we're closing out, remind folks is that we're in this to help provide solutions to firms, but also to build out platforms. So it's all about, at the end of the day, providing solutions to not just the operators and advisors, but the clients. And you talked about that earlier. What's in the best interest of the clients. So that's why, we have this fiduciary standard.
Yeah, and I think if we stick to that, we won't go wrong, right? It's really about the end client.
It is.
Anyway, I've enjoyed being with you guys the last 3 days, actually. It was a good time. I think we've all had a good time. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I know it's early. Thank you so much.